He was born in Cyprus Island, educated at the Novosibirskā State University, took his degree in geophysics. He studied also at Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, received his Master of Arts degree in 1999 and his Master of Sacred Theology degree in 2011. In 1997, he was ordained as a deacon in the Estonian Evangelical Lutheran Church. And when were you ordained? 2001. 2001. He was ordained. Yes, by Bishop Jonas Kalvanis. I got to know him back in the 90s when he and several other Russian students attended my church in Fort Wayne, and he's a very prized friend. Please welcome Aleksej Streltsov.
First of all, I would like to bring greetings from the church that I represent here, Siberian Evangelical Lutheran Church, and Bishop of Teoloģijas. I'm very glad to be here and able to speak here. The title of my presentation as it goes is this: Lutheran Education in the 21st Century in View of the Modern Communication Technologies. And originally this presentation was prepared for the theological conference that took place a year ago in Prague. And the general theme of that conference was Lutheranism in the 21st century. So that was the topic that I chose for that event. And as it happened, I was one of the few that actually spoke about Lutheranism in the 21st century, thinking what it might be in the future. Anyway, please forgive me if what I'm going to say now is not exactly relevant to your situation, but it has partly relevant. The title of this presentation may presuppose that it will be dedicated primarily to questions of a technical character, such as how the incredibly fast development of the IT sector in the recent years is capable of revolutionizing the ongoing process of theological pastoral education in the Lutheran Church. However, in the global sense, the question of naive romantic trust that scientific technical progress will lead to the building of paradise on earth was taken from the general agenda already by the time of World War I. Since then, a sober perception of reality has replaced fruitless dreams. And people understand, for example, that the other side of the so-called peaceful atom achievements presupposes not only the ever-present possibility of nuclear conflict, but also technogenic catastrophes on a previously unthinkable scale. In principle, if the technical aspect were the sole, indeed the main aspect of this report, then the whole lecture would be reduced to 1 minute. It is undeniable that new and progressive communication technologies may be utilized in the field of Lutheran education. Virtually any technical observation on the topic of modern communication technologies is destined to become obsolete in a short time. For example, in the 1990s, the high cost of modern-based internet access was a significant factor when they discussed distance learning. The author of this presentation also remembers how 14 years ago there was held a discussion of the possibility of acquiring expensive specialized equipment for conducting classes from CTS Fort Wayne, Indiana, for the students in Novosibirsk in Russia. Since that time, technical progress has completely changed the landscape of communication, not only for businesses but also for personal users. Now, extraordinary complexities of technical nature are for the most part a matter of the past. So it would suffice to say, we will implement education via Skype and the case is closed. Still, the philosophical or even the theological aspect of this question looks more interesting. Where is the world going? The famous Latin phrase states that times change and we change with them. But how decisive are the recent changes as applied to the sphere of Lutheran education? Certainly, modern technologies are neither good nor bad in and of themselves. The problem, or something that may turn into a problem, when one approaches the matter incorrectly or simply underestimates the role of technology, is that it is virtually impossible to escape the influence of modern communication technologies in the contemporary world. And so they influence us in more ways than we can imagine. In this sense, the minimum goal is to prevent any harm that modern communication technologies can do in the sphere of education, while the optimistic goal for us is to learn to use them for the benefit of the Church. In order to move further, we must specify what education and what technologies we imply. In a certain sense, our Lutheran tradition, with its emphasis on Luther's catechism, is closely related to education. It includes Christian education in the family, educational activity on the congregational level, Sunday school, classes on scripture, or confessional writings for adults, special seminars, conferences. It also involves professional education of the clergy and other church workers. The latter is done today as a rule in specialized seminaries or theological institutions. In turn, while the most typical form of such education implies internal or on-site training, in the last century or so, the concept of distance or extramural education, though still somewhat a recent phenomenon, has been able to claim a serious place in the structure of education in general. Accordingly, the usage of modern communication technologies differs significantly based on the format and goals of training. The picture is made more complex in view of the fact that we rarely deal with one of the pure forms, but rather with a combination of various types. So, in this report, I will pay attention mainly to the professional education of pastors and church workers. Education in the context of church and secular history. One might define so-called traditionalist approach as viewing the seminary with an on-site training as a normative model of higher education in the Lutheran context. Nevertheless, it is important to realize that, in a certain sense, even the so-called traditional seminary represents somewhat of a change or compromise in the question of pastoral training. Any educational model in the context of Lutheranism, as well as Christianity in general, should be viewed against the Christological background of the ministry. Christ, as the one who has called disciples, personally instructed them over a period of 3 years and then sent them to make disciples of all the nations. That must be the true starting point of any genuine model of professional Lutheran education. Christianity is a path of discipleship. And while a Christian always continues to have Christ as his principal teacher, he acquires specific instruction from a minister, bishop or a priest. It is impossible to obtain adequate understanding of the goals of education in the Lutheran Church without grasping the central role of the Holy Ministry in this process. Not only is the teacher-disciple model represented as the norm in the New Testament and the history of the ancient church, but even in today's secular context, the private lessons are still considered to be elitarian type of education, which is accessible only to select individuals. Antiquity provides a number of examples of such personal instruction, both in the non-Christian and Christian areas. Aristotle taught philosophy to Alexander the Great. Numerous prominent bishops and teachers of the Christian Church have received their education from their teachers, who were also bishops. Many archdeacons who personally served the bishops and shared in their duties subsequently became bishops themselves. Famous examples are Athanasius the Great, who is a deacon and secretary of Alexander of Alexandria, was with him at the Council of Nicaea in 325, and Leo the Great, who prior to his episcopal office served as an archdeacon of the Roman Church. Even Augustine, according to his recollections at the Confessions, gained his major Christian instruction from the Bishop Ambrose, whose sermons he listened to so carefully when he was in Milan. In this way, the system of internal education provided by the universities and seminaries appears to be a certain departure from this original model. However, the person of the teacher has continued to play a major role. Conceptually, internal education remained the king and the sole player in the field. It is fashionable today to compare the rapid spread of the internet in its importance to the invention of the printing press by Gutenberg, and thus await a certain breakthrough in relation to the internet comparable with or even exceeding the 16th century Reformation. Although the rapid spread of the Reformation throughout Europe is justly associated with this printing phenomenon, it is worth noting at the same time that in this case, distance education offered through pamphlets and theological works was not considered fully sufficient to trigger Reformation ideas in real-life situations. On the contrary, students from all over Europe rushed to Wittenberg University in order to obtain an education there, and it was afterwards that they brought the Reformation to their homelands with more or less success. For example, paths that the Reformation took in Sweden and Finland depended on the character and content of education that Paulus Petri and Michael Agricola personally received from the major theologians of the Reformation. The very high standard of professional university education they received distinguished Lutheran pastors for a long time. And where such conditions did not exist initially, such as on the American frontier or in the Russian Empire, measures were undertaken to correct it and provide means for future ministers to get a full-time university or seminary education. In the middle of the 19th century, the rapid technological progress and resulting social changes requiring more basic literacy and skills of simple workers brought to life the concept of distance learning. An idea that it is possible and desirable to provide education even to those people who for some reason were not able to attend ordinary university classes and be involved in a full-time studies would not have been possible without the development of the postal system in the 19th century. And so this is why it is England of the time that was natural choice of this new approach. Isaac Pitman began teaching by correspondence in Bath, England in 1840. Students were expected to rewrite passages of the Bible and return them for grading through the new penny-post system. Although an analysis of the connection between extramural education and the colonial mindset is outside of parameters of this report, it is interesting that the spread of distance learning also coincided with the growth of the colonial system. In the world of education, new communication technologies were so closely, though not exclusively, associated with the context of the extramural education. As new means appeared, such as radio and then television, they contributed to advances made in this type of learning. In the course of the 20th century, distance education established itself even in such academically conservative regions as Germany. However, even now, there remains a general public uneasiness having to do with the quality of such education. Questions are still asked whether it is inferior to traditional internal education. Adherents of distance education keep stating that soon the day will come when the whole world will realize that such learning is no different from any other. But in a day and age of increasing proliferation of degrees, it becomes harder to believe. Next topic, the incarnation as key to the nature of pastoral training. We often tend to think that new technologies would irreversibly change many aspects of life to the point that the old ways will eventually be completely forgotten. In reality, it does not happen that way. When the cinema came into being, many thought it would abolish the theater. The invention of television did not eliminate radio. Motorcycles did not replace bicycles. Likewise, in the area of education, modern communication technologies do not necessarily make obsolete what was done before. So we must avoid extremes in our approach to the preparation of priests in the Church. In this sense, the core of the problem is not the form of distance education itself, or the possibility of partial usage of such distance education for pastoral training, but rather the model that uses exclusively or heavily accentuated extramural pastoral training as desirable as possible type of preparation. We must resist this understanding primarily for theological reasons. The internal character of preparation of a priest has to do with the character of the incarnation of our Lord. God chose not to function in a remote mode, but rather the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. A fundamental disconnect with the theology of the incarnation is inherent in an exclusively extramural approach to pastoral education, whether or not it is accomplished with the means of modern communication technologies. Relations of Christ and His bride, the Church, presuppose a certain intimacy, including personal interaction in the matter of education. Any attempt to organize preparation of a pastor exclusively through off-site training is equivalent to an attempt to conceive a child through the internet, though with usage of some extracorporal fertility means. The chances are not that great. In addition, in the area of pastoral training, the matter is not so much that no pastor will result from it, but that the pastor coming out of such a program would have difficulties applying himself to flesh and blood ministry in parish setting. A pastor is trained to publicly proclaim the gospel and administer baptism, absolution, and the Lord's Supper. A priest also conducts weddings and burials, consecrates houses and other places, and does other things that require his personal presence and do not happen at a distance in a remote mode. In this sense, the ministry that the priest carries out for his parishioners is inherently internal and not distant, not extramural. At least it is this on-site activity that the priest must consider his priority in the course of the ministry. It is true today that more pastors are quite active on the internet, and there is nothing wrong with it per se, except when a new pattern emerges, revealing shifted priorities in the ministry. When, for example, instead of conducting a Bible class in the church or visiting a hospital, priest pursues his exciting project on the internet, considering it equally or even more important than his regular duties. If the pastoral ministry is viewed first and foremost as a transfer of information to people, enabling them to make better decisions in their life, then indeed this information may safely be obtained in a remote mode, so that later it can be retranslated to the audience. This is why the general Protestant mentality seems to be more compatible with a distance approach to education. Jesus is infinitely far from us, or if they think that Jesus is close to us, then they think only in emotional or spiritual terms, but not in specific physical terms, because in that way he is up there in the heavens, and so extramural pattern of education would generally correspond to theological presuppositions in such framework. There may still be problems of social or physical character, but not so much theological problems. However, Lutherans significantly differ from majority of other Protestants in that they especially value the sacramental context of church life. Besides, in the Lutheran tradition, the pastor is indeed a Seelsorger, and this part of the ministry takes place through a personal interaction between the pastor and the layperson. At present, even some confessional Lutheran pastors, as I hear from some of my American colleagues, do not mind taking confessions over the phone. While we would not necessarily claim the lack of reality of the sacramental act of absolution performed in this case, the confession of seal may be broken simply because of deficiencies in technology or some external, intentionally malicious activity. Maybe I think this way because I come from a country where unfortunately there is some tradition of listening in phone conversations. And now internet and cell phone providers in Russia are required by law to divulge all information content to the police in case of inquiry. But in any case, people here entrust their souls not just to the person of the pastor, but also to the personless technology and whoever may stand behind it with kind or cruel intentions. Few people would agree to walk out to a central city square and confess their secret sins right there. And yet this is exactly what happens when acts that presuppose confidentiality are performed through modern communication technologies. Unfortunately, such technology simply cannot provide for us the same level of privacy that is enabled when sins are shared in a traditional confessional. When theological education primarily implies remote access to certain materials and further work with these materials, the result will be impersonalization of education. In this model, there are no teachers to speak of, and that will violate our original teacher-disciple model, which is basically a Christological model. So when such incarnational approach is lost, then there remain virtually no distinctions between Christian pastoral education and secular education or education within other religious systems such as Islam. Additionally, there are some complexities of technical character. Firstly, an important principle must be followed. The technological level used in the educational process should naturally blend with the local context. But since I think it is not a problem here in the Baltijas, I will probably skip this point. Secondly, and this is a technical aspect of the previously mentioned impersonalization of education, online communication through text correspondence cannot provide total assurance in the positive identification of the person on the other side. A random person may well speak on behalf of your contact while pretending to be a contact. A life story comes to mind how in one case both a Lutheran pastor and his wife wrote from the same account in a social network group dedicated to Lutheranism. And that created major confusion among the group participants. Because they thought that it was a pastor speaking, while in fact his wife was typing all this stuff. Thirdly, the sad downside of the rate of technical progress is that numerous technologies that were considered new just recently quickly go out of date. We can mention tapes and CDs and even DVDs are being obsolete now. So now MP3 is more popular. Today's technology may not stay there tomorrow. Fourthly, an impact that modern communication technologies have on people makes them quite dangerous when they get into wrong hands. That is, technologies will greatly multiply the negative effects of bad teaching. Just a local domestic example from the country I come from. We had the work of an organization called the Luterāņu, and they did use very advanced communication technologies back in the 1990s and 2000s, but people doing it used such technologies to basically trigger a new schismatic church group, and they basically did shit stealing existing churches and tried to create their own group. And so that was a negative effect of what they were doing using such technologies. Up to this time, it looked like this report presented a very one-sided, ultra-conservative approach to pastoral training, as though we see no other devices allowed in theological training other than a blackboard and a piece of chalk. That's not true, of course. Opportunities of integration of modern communication technologies into the educational process are enormous. So I would offer the following description, which is certainly not complete, but it would give a very general idea how technologies may be incorporated into the educational process in a way that would help students of theology to be prepared for the future ministry in the church. 1. Internet resources. Of course, potential expansion here is virtually limitless. And the big question is whether or not there must be free public access to such resources. Even though it might be tempting to limit access to users in an attempt to sell it directly from the internet through publication, my personal opinion is that the free content here is definitely a desirable option. The rapid development and recent political success of the so-called pirate parties in Europe may signal perhaps what direction things will develop in the future. We live in a time of easy accessibility of information, much of which is instantly available. So now, today's Google generation even thinks differently, and it's a major philosophical shift in how one approaches education and thinking. So if a church or a seminary would restrict access to the information, then they would eventually fail to impact the target audience and fall behind, because other information would be readily available. 2. Organization and modification of libraries. This is connected with the previous section, but it is a special issue. This is where technologies really come in handy. New and recent educational institutions that have no large traditional library resources must do whatever it takes to provide internet access to teachers and students and develop some ways to use electronic resources. Likewise, libraries should make every effort to make their book collection accessible through the internet, at least by way of their catalog, but possibly as textbooks as well. 3. Usage of textbooks for particular courses. It appears that electronic book readers will supplement traditional textbooks in our classrooms. I'm not sure they will replace them completely, but they will probably supplement them. I don't know, do you have electronic readers in your public schools in the Baltijas? In some schools in Lithuania, Latvia? In Russia they have experimented in some schools, especially in Moscow, where they use electronic readers instead of regular textbooks. Anyway, it looks like this may be direction of future development. And that would help run. And also for a student, it would be easier to assemble his personal pastoral library in this way. 4. Podcasts. This is new and highly mobile form of education. It allows a student to study on the go using a number of modern mobile devices for this purpose. It is especially useful for the study of disciplines that take a long time to master. In particular, languages may be studied through podcasts that seminaries develop specifically for the needs of their students. That will allow the seminaries to better prepare capable prospective students for theological training at the seminary. Because also in the earlier days, the biblical classical languages were normally mastered before seminary enrollment. The languages were studied in gymnasiums and schools. 5. Skype or similar means of live connection. This mode implies interaction. It would work best if it's implemented in combination with on-site training. So if the students already know the instructor from previous personal engagement with him, or if a part of a specific course is done in a classroom. Skype also makes it possible to bring guest lecturers to a classroom setting, eliminating geographical boundaries. It is also possible to continue to privately tutor students via Skype when the class is finished. We use Skype for special programs for the alumni. The list may grow long here, I'll test it just to mention a few possibilities. 6, the last but possibly not the least, social networks. Even though these do not appear to be the first choice of means for education, having a reputation as a medium serving primarily entertainment or career purposes, their ubiquity and their potential make them a worthy tool for use in both formal and informal types of education. One of my sons recently dropped a remark about his classmate who was not represented in the popular Russian network Vkontakte. He said he lives in the Stone Age. To be sure, the very name social network implies that such networks may be used to develop social skills that are important to have for a human pastoral church work. One potential student for our seminary in Novosibirsk resides in a remote place in the Ural region. It's a very small Bashkir village where he is, with roads, not very good roads going there. I visited there a couple of times. So I did not expect him to be an active internet user. But when we met in person and we discussed how to stay connected, he asked me what social networks I was on, and he named more than 3 for himself. Another prospective student contacted me through Facebook and asked me questions based on his reading of the Book of Concord. In some way, his education has started even before he was formally enrolled at the seminary. So it's not a question of starting a special project and utilizing any special resources that will especially replace traditional seminary education. It is simply that communication technologies that we have already, that we have available to us, make the process of interaction very simple and allow us to proceed in the matter of distance education much quicker than before. They may be a very good use of social networks within the framework of regular education too, provided that all or nearly all students in the class are part of the same network. Communication via social networks comes very natural to younger people today, and so it is very convenient for the students when an instructor sets a special group in a particular network where he makes announcements, gives assignments, and answers questions that the students might have. This has been the recent experience of our staff instructors in the seminary and other church members who do the teaching not only at the seminary but also at other higher educational institutions in Novosibirsk, the university and other places. Final section, future in the past. If the church attempts to race with the contemporary secular culture in an attempt to become more accessible to modern people at the expense of her integrity, then she is bound to fail. That's the wrong way to go. Modern methods of education cannot create a new reality by themselves. This is just a form, while it is the content of instruction, the confessional doctrine that matters, provided that this doctrine is grasped by the students. They're not just passive recipients of this doctrine, but actually can take it inside and can understand what it is about. Overemphasis on distance education would come into conflict with the basic theology of the incarnation, as it is expressed in the liturgy and pastoral care. Traditional seminaries are in danger now, both from the outside and the inside. When the seminaries are forced to follow some alien educational and ecclesiastical ideologies, this cannot be approved. And sometimes seminaries are forced because they see that they have less students coming in, and so they think what we can do, and perhaps we can eventually get rid of full-time education altogether and have some new, easier techniques of training. But when a seminary makes a decision about the permissibility of exclusive distance education for the purpose of the pastoral ministry, it cuts the branch on which it is sitting. One may view it as a reasonable compromise that will allow the seminaries to stay floating for a while. But in the end, this is a way of self-destruction. It will lead to a situation where there will be no perceived need, practically speaking, for the traditional seminaries altogether. The root of this problem, as I tried to explain before, is lack of understanding of the nature of the holy ministry. In a context where formal theological education is understood just as a cumbersome and dull barrier to be crossed in order to get to the exciting practical work, understood mostly in psychological terms, there indeed remains little place for the classical seminaries. With the ever-increasing pace of the spread of information technologies, the problem of teaching authority becomes more acute than ever before. Anybody can teach anything and quickly share these ideas using modern equipment. You just go to the internet and see a huge number of any YouTube posts, sites where people speak and teach anything they want to, and some of them may have a big following. So, if the seminaries or equivalent institutions are forced to close down and are replaced by alternative decentralized ways of providing education, then the level of competence among the clergy will dramatically decline. Therefore, the solution must be of institutional nature. Seminaries must be especially supported by the Church, even though it is a major undertaking, especially under present circumstances. Sometimes opponents of the seminaries go so far as to say that it is sinful to bring the students to the seminary for theological instruction. I have heard it myself when I was visiting Central Asia. And the rationale behind this claim may vary. Sometimes it is concern for the mission work that is already going in the local context, and students will be detached from this mission work, and so it will harm to the church, as they say. Other times it's a concern that when students spend time being prepared at the seminary, it would hinder their further secular career, or maybe career of a white student. So it's going to be unfair to such student and his family. Of course, on-site training is a difficult procedure, but this is exactly part of the theology of the cross that Dr. Evanson talked about. Famous saying of Luther, oratio, meditatio, tentatio. And of course, when there is no tentatio, that implies a certain sacrifice on the part of the student, then we cannot be sure that we will get a faithful and confessional Lutheran pastor at the end of this long process. So it is important to use modern communication technologies with caution and in a limited way. But at the same time, it is desirable for seminary professors to be actively involved in the church and parish life on a liturgical level. Being just a staff instructor with limited involvement in the church reality outside the school is the same as living in the broader virtual reality alone. Even in secular universities, ongoing research is very important to keep the professional teaching staff up to date. How much more than it applies to the ecclesiastical context, where practical involvement in the ministry on the part of the teaching clergy is vital for them to be able to contribute to the pastoral formation of the students. So the questions having to do with modern education and the usage of modern technologies in it are complex and varied. This practical report is not designed to make any conclusive judgment on the matter, but only to highlight some issues that have meaning for the seminary and for the church. So, should we use modern technologies in our education? It is not an either-or, but both-and dilemma. We must not be fearful of new technologies, thinking that they would necessarily undermine our seminaries. The real issue is not technologies, and not even the quality of education as such. If the whole perspective is correct, then the quality will improve over time. But the major question is understanding of the spiritual nature of the holy ministry, which leads to the proper understanding of how pastoral education must be done in every given setting. And we understand the pastoral dimension of formation of the future pastor as Christological dimension. So as long as we keep our priorities straight and goals clear, we will be able to use modern communication technologies for the benefit of the church. In a way, such usage of the modern technologies for the ultimate goal of pastoral formation may well begin before the official seminary course starts. Then it continues alongside the seminary classroom and does not stop after graduation either. But in any case, there is neither need nor sense in replacing the traditional seminary with an alternative model just because of current missiological or educational conjecture. Even among current internet freelance-based companies, their staff meets in real life from time to time. So we may consider seminary training as an instruction for several years in real life, even though online or similar advanced training and interaction may precede, go alongside, and follow the main education. So again, it's not either or, but it is both and. So the key to the future of Lutheran education is in the past, in the confession that does not change over time. Paraphrasing the words of our Lord from the Sermon on the Mount, we may conclude reporting these words. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things, including the modern technological means, shall be added to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aleksej. We have a few minutes, about 3 minutes before our break is given. Perhaps there's a question or comment.
I appreciate your lecture very, very much. And there were two things I wrote down, and you covered the topics which I hoped you would. And one was the issue of incarnational, the ministry and the theological issue. It happens incarnationally. We're not Gnostics in that respect. The second thing, and that is directly related with this impersonalization. I think there's one more thing, and I have to say I've dealt with this all my life ever since I've gone to the seminary, and that would be that I think the chief function of the seminary would also be that that individual is taught to think theologically. Everybody said, I mean, Martin Luther's opponents, they used the Bible. I mean, it wasn't that they had a bunch of people that said, I don't believe in the Bible. They had the Bible. but were they able to go and think theologically in such a sense that they would see what the truth of the Scripture is? And my fear is that that always doesn't happen it needs to happen to me in an interactive environment.
Exactly. I think it's necessary to think theologically for such a student, and also to learn to speak theologically and be corrected when such student does not speak the way the church expects him to speak. And I think we can speak about more aspects of this that I did not mention. I did not intend to cover all aspects of such problem. But for example, at a traditional seminary, there is a sense of community of faith, where people come together and they share their struggles together, and it's very important because as students at the seminary, they are a little bit like parishioners in the parish. They experience some problems there that afterwards they will deal with the similar problems of their parishioners, and I think that is important as well. And even when, for example, students sit together at a dining table and they talk theology, I love coming to Park because this is what happens there, and it's great. In our seminary, for a long time, students did not talk theology like this over the table, but ate silently, and they wondered why. And one person explained to me that in the East, the monks were supposed to be silent when they were eating. And so one of our proverbs say, "Когда я ем, я глух и нем." When I eat, I should shut up, something like this. But in the Western monastic culture, that was the time when they were talking over the table. And so I think it's Western communication is very important. And you simply cannot get it when you just study by way of distance learning. You don't get that type of community.
Interesting comment. I was in my paper, my last quote, which I didn't get to. There's an article by Ernst Schwiebert on the Reformation and theological education at Wittenberg. It goes into a great deal about how they developed a library and how they redid the curriculum. And he makes this comment: the key to Luther's great success, where others before him had tried and failed, lay in the training of the clergymen who sat at his feet and those of his fellow professors, and were taught how to interpret the Scriptures in the light of the Bible in the apostolic age. And I think that's the strength of a good seminary, where there's a chance to sit in class, but also over food and drink and talk theology. And one other comment about technology. I didn't get to this point either, but I'm working with the librarian at our seminary, Robert Rothmeyer, and we've traveled quite a few countries. He helped Aleksej years ago build a fabulous library in Novosibirskā. He actually traveled to Lithuania with me in my first trip. But now we're going to places like Nigeria and Togo, where the elements were dust and humidity and bugs eat books. It's a war. And we are looking at Kindles. Now this might seem like an American platonic dream. Oh, just put technology in there, it'll solve the problems. But we're looking at it seriously. To send an African who graduates from the seminary 200 books, let alone 500 books, to have in his library, to be a pastor, to write sermons, to teach, costs hundreds, thousands of dollars for shipping, because shipping's gone way up. You can get 1,000 on a Kindle. Well, you know what they'll do. They'll break it in 3 years. Well, what do you want to do? Replace 1,000 volumes or $100 and replace the Kindle with the books on it? So this is, maybe it's another, like we did, looking into technology, and in 5 years it's changed. But technology is coming not only to America, but which is a little slow, but jungles.